My name is Cesar Pereira. I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and a board member of Ciarb Brazil branch. And I'll be your host for today's episode of Ciarb Brazil Moment. I'd like to, again, like always, thank Arbitration Channel in Lauro Parente for the opportunity to have for the opportunity they give Ciarb Brazil to share with all their audience some interesting topics about dispute resolution. Like our previous episodes, today we are going to focus on the accelerated route to fellowship program. We will have in a few days in October the 2022 edition of the Accelerated Route to Fellowship program of the Brazil branch, and we in the series of episodes we are discussing various aspects of this. Today we are very lucky to have here with us a group of very accomplished arbitrators, practitioners, scholars who have recently become Ciarb fellows. And what we really would like to discuss with them today is why it makes sense for professionals that are so accomplished in their careers to take the trouble, because it is a lot of work, to do the fellowship program and become fellows of Ciarb. The big questions are the big questions we are going to discuss today. What really attracted you to Ciarb at this stage in your careers, and what can you tell other well-established professionals about taking the fellowship program? For this, we have here with us Professor Paula Costa Silva, Professor Peter Sester, and Domingos Refinetti. And I'd like to briefly, in addition to thanking all of them for their time today, to briefly introduce each one of them before we start talking. So Professor Paula Costa Silva is a full professor at the Faculty of Law of the University of Lisbon, where she has taught law of obligations, securities, and financial markets law, philosophy of law, arbitration, and civil procedure. She's fully qualified. She's a fully qualified lawyer before the Brazilian and Portuguese bars. She has acted as sole arbitrator, chair, and co-arbitrator in international and national arbitrations for the past 25 years. She was ranked as a Band 1 arbitrator in the Chamber's ranking for Europe. She's frequently appointed as legal expert in international arbitrations, and she has recently published a work with which is more than 1,000 pages long, where she brings together her papers relating to arbitration that were written during the past 35 years, and that she considers to be of some relevance. She is, as I mentioned, a fellow of Ciarb. Like Domingos and Peter, she joined Ciarb last year in 2021. Professor Peter Christian Sester is a dual qualified lawyer in Brazil and Germany. He also holds 2 PhDs, one in commercial law and the other in economics. Peter has served as tenured professor of commercial law at several German and Swiss universities. He has practiced commercial law for 14 years at the Frankfurt office of a leading UK international law firm. He originally focused on corporate finance, capital markets, asset and project finance, M&A, and LBO. In 2017, he founded his own law boutique in Rio de Janeiro. He relocated to Brazil. In 2019, he became vice president of the leading Brazilian arbitration institution, CAMCCBC, and he continues to teach at renowned universities in Europe and Brazil, like the New University of Lisbon, Fundação Getúlio Vargas in Rio de Janeiro. He's also a fellow of Ciarb, and like I said, joined CIR last year in 2021. Domingos Refinetti has been practicing law since his graduation in 1976 from the University of São Paulo, later with a specialization in business administration from FGV. And he was a dispute resolution partner for decades in one of the major Brazilian, or actually Latin American law firms, in one of the founding partners of another major Brazilian law firm, also as a dispute resolution partner. Presently, Domingos is a partner at WK Advogados. Domingos has been involved in arbitration and mediation for many years, being part of the most important arbitration and mediation chambers in Brazil, with special expertise in commercial, contractual, civil, and corporate matters. Domingos, we are very lucky to have Domingos also as a fellow of Ciarb, and he joined us also last year. So this is a common point with our interviewees. They all have wonderful established careers, and last year they decided to take the fellowship program and become fellows of Ciarb. So that's basically what we would like to discuss with you today. I'd like to start with Paula, if you don't mind. Paula, you're based in London and practice internationally. Very luckily for us here in Brazil, you're just as active in the Brazilian academic scene in your areas of expertise. Please tell us a little more about your career as an academic and arbitrator. What made you decide to join Ciarb as a fellow in 2021 after so many accomplishments, and how has your experience been so far?
Thank you, Cesar, and good morning to all of you. I'm very pleased to share this opportunity with all of you, esteemed colleagues, as you know. In answering your question, Cesar, I believe I have had a very regular academic career. I wasn't an amazing student. I was a very normal student in my graduation, during my graduation. After that, I went through the various degrees of the career, from the undergraduation to becoming a full professor. But it was a very regular career, not an amazing career. My first contact with arbitration, it was in 1987. So please don't go behind the calendar. It was in 1987 in my master's degree. I chose then the course of civil procedure, and there was a reason for this choice. There was a very recent arbitration law coming into force in Portugal. The law is from 1986. And I knew nothing about arbitration. So I went there to learn everything I could with Professora Magalhães Colasso. I have always liked procedural matters because I think it is through these techniques that you must ensure the material system. And the great challenge we face in these areas of knowledge is when we reflect on an adjudication system, you have to maximize the efficiency without a loss of fundamental procedural guarantees. And this is our objective. We must try to achieve some kind of Pareto equilibrium or optimum, not between individuals, of course, but between all legal values in presence. Coming now to Ciarb and to the fellowship. I made contact with the Ciarb, as you know, Cesar, through my participation in some activities in the Brazilian branch. And I immediately perceived that everything that the Ciarb proposed was very stimulating. There were many occasions for real learning, not just for learning, but for real learning. I could listen to very experienced colleagues who told us of the theoretical difficulties that the practice brought them. And then I realized that all the meetings allowed me to know the problems that were emerging. And I would never have met them in real time if I was isolated at home studying. So that was a start of my following your activities. As to the fellowship, beyond the recognition that this title obviously means, I realized that I could only have this title if my practice was positively evaluated through blind peer review. And this was the determining reason for me to enroll on the program. I understand that we have to be evaluated through all our lifetime. This is the best way for us to improve our practice. And after all, what we do as arbitrators has a huge responsibility. We make decisions with direct impact on the lives of people. And we must always remember that our awards are final and binding. We cannot allow ourselves not to want to be better and better, to learn from the most experienced and to be assessed by them. As to my experience to the Ciarb, the last thread of your question, which has been happening with the Brazilian branch, what can I say? It's positive. It's very, very positive. Unfortunately, and because I have a slightly heavy professional life, I can't keep up with all your activities. But the ones I have been able to follow are of high standard, high intellectual, scientific standard, and I always give my time for very well spent. In a word, Cesar, the experience with Ciarb has been very interesting, and as far as I am concerned, it is to be carried on. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. This is great to have your feedback about that. And Peter, you have recently published two more books, and they are only the tip of the iceberg in your long academic career, comprising several countries. Could you tell us a little more about your recent work and how it connects with you with becoming a fellow? Do you think the growth of Ciarb in Brazil and Latin America has played a role in your decision to take the fellowship program?
Well, first of all, many thanks, Cesar, for having me here today. It's a pleasure to participate, and I hope I can motivate some colleagues to register for the Accelerate route to fellowship that will take place soon in Brazil. Well, let me make just one step back to the development of my career and the entrance into arbitration. Probably differently from many others, I rather joined arbitration lately in my career. I was a corporate lawyer for many years, corporate and financial markets, both in university activities, academic activities, teaching, but also in practice. And only maybe 10, 15 years ago, I gradually entered into arbitration. It was back in 2018 when I organized an international arbitration conference in Switzerland with the great support of CAM-CCBC. We had basically all major players in that conference from Brazil, but also international colleagues like Gary Bourne, for instance. And but we also had Peter Rees. Peter Rees used to be, at least as far as I remember, he was sitting on the board of CIRB in London, and I had the first conversations with him about joining eventually CIRB. But at the time I was very busy and I had to organize my move to Brazil, make the Brazilian bar exam. And so it was only during the pandemic when I found the time not only to write two, actually soon the third book is going to be released, but also to make the CIB exam, and I was motivated, let's say, by 3 or 4 reasons. As you might hear, I'm not originally from Brazil, neither from Portugal, but I'm German. And in the German legal educational system, we are trained since the very first day to a very systematical approach to the law. And award writing is, in my opinion, something that should be systematized for many reasons, for your own or the organization of your thoughts, but also for facilitating the execution and eventually the judicial control, and also the robustness of the award in such a judicial control. And it was also a Brazilian judge that is a member of our group that motivated me 1.5 years ago, or 1 year ago, I think, to finally make the Exceller route, which was a superb experience. So it was to systemize my thoughts when writing an award, which I think is the best way is to learn that by making the accelerated route. Second, like Paula already mentioned, I'm also a very huge advocate of lifelong learning. I think we should, as lawyers, always continue to be a student. We cannot just rely on our past, on our last 20, 25 years. Our clients, the users of arbitration, deserve first-class technical skills, and it is not sufficient to have passed a concurso 30 years ago or to have been a super student in the graduation. I mean, you must keep up your knowledge all the time, and I think that's a responsibility, almost a fiduciary duty arbitrators have vis-a-vis their clients. And finally, maybe not to extend myself too long, the Brazilian group is, I would say, very special, thanks to the great initiative of our founders, especially Cesar, but also I think someone who was very important at the beginning, Claudio Finkelstein, who is also someone who always inspired me with his ethics and his open-minded approach to arbitrators and new players in Brazilian arbitration. So I think it was a mixture of the desire to structure my knowledge, to, of course, also to gain some kind of marketing tool, because CIB in the last 4 or 5 years, not in all places of the world, but in many, and especially in fast-growing places, fast-growing arbitration hubs like Asia, Singapore, Africa, and South America, Brazil especially, has become really a seal of quality. And it's not only, let's say, at the end of the day, our field arbitration is also a kind of business, and you have to market yourself to get appointments. So it's also a seal of quality. I'm not a marqueteiro, as the Brazilian says. I'm very bad with that. You know, I'm too often saying what I think, but my approach to marketing is rather quality. And so I think that's a perfect tool for arbitrators with a similar mind setting as I think we all have here in this conference here today. Thank you so far.
Thank you, Peter. And turning to you now, Domingos, you are now, and you have been a partner in some of the most important Brazilian law firms. As a matter of fact, your current law firm is arguably the Brazilian champion in number of partners that are also Ciarb fellows. And we all know that the fellowship program involves challenges and hard work. And as Peter and Paula said, involves also submitting your work to being evaluated by others. And what can you tell us about your experience of taking the ARF, the Accelerated Route to Fellowship, in becoming a fellow, and how does that interplay with your career?
Well, Cesar, thank you. Initially, thank you for the invitation. Thanks to Canal Arbitraje. It's a pleasure and an honor to share this interview with Paula and Peter. And Paula, I mean, if you did not have an amazing career, I don't know what I'm going to tell about my career and my poor curriculum compared to your curriculum and Peter's curriculum. And being the last one to speak, it's always a difficult task, because I think that both of you have given fully complete explanations about the reasons that I could give for my joining the CRRB in Brazil. And indeed, I'm very proud of having 4 partners of WK Advogados as Ciarb fellows. It has been, and it was a very challenging task for me to go through the examination, but I must tell you, a very rewarding one. And I would name a few very important experiences that I have had so far being a fellow of Ciarb. First of all, as you have already mentioned, the possibility to enlarge and increase my knowledge about arbitration in general, but especially about international arbitration and its peculiarities, which are innumerous and not very well known in Brazil, I must say. Second, the possibility to engage in a high-level relationship with highly reputed international arbitrators like Peter and Paula, like yourself, Cesar, coming from all over the world, and to continue to learn and to learn continuously with all of you, and Paula and Peter again, and Cesar and all our fellows in Brazil are an example of that. And I'm really thankful for having had this opportunity at a late stage of my career. As you mentioned, I started as a lawyer in 76. I was already a trainee in 72. So you can imagine how long it took me to be really engaged in arbitration, but especially in this high level of arbitration, which is proportionate to us by Ciarb. And third, the possibility to be involved in very important discussions, debates through congresses, seminars, courses, and all the issues currently being held and studied about arbitration, about international arbitration, about arbitrators, which is a delicate matter in Brazil as well nowadays, as you know, and that actually affect arbitration, generally speaking, mainly commercial investment, international arbitration, as we know it right now, and that have very important and relevant repercussions in our domestic Brazilian arbitrations. I would mention what is quite an issue right now and is being discussed abroad as well, about the role of the arbitrators in terms of their disclosure duties and obligations, for instance. So I think that being member of the CIRB Brazilian chapter, but overall, has been a wonderful experience, and I'm really, really pleased to have been able to join you. Thanks.
Thank you, Domingos. I'd like to actually ask all of you one question, and starting with Peter. And if you can, then Paula and Domingos, if you can comment as well. We always say that when you join CIARB, you become part of a very large network of 17,000 professionals in 149 countries that has been growing since 1915. And so international exposure and recognition are one of the benefits of CIARB membership, especially if you practice in a country that's outside the main centers for ADR. You three have different perspectives. Right? Paula is from Portugal, Peter is from Germany, and now Brazil. Domingos is from Brazil, but has an international practice. So, how do you see, from your perspective, how real, in your perspective, is the international exchange within the CIARB network? Peter, if you can start, then we'll turn to Paula and Domingos.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have just 1.5 year experience at Ciarb, but in that short time of period, I have the impression that the exchange, especially between Brazil and London, our headquarter, but also to some extent, maybe a little bit lesser, but also very important still, the exchange with the North American branch, where I actually, because of the schedule, made my accelerated route at the time. I couldn't do it in October, so I had to do it in August. That's the only reason why I choose North American branch. That and at the time it was not so much relevant because it was all online. So we were anyway at home in our offices in Brazil. So, but I would say, and we had a marvelous conference with our colleagues in London I think it was in March, Caesar, or April. And it facilitates, let's say, on the one side for individuals, the members, to get engaged and to communicate with colleagues from other important arbitration hubs, but it also facilitates the institutional wise the possibility to demonstrate, to expose to international markets the advanced stage of arbitration in Brazil and the possibilities that that are existing in our domestic, in our Latin American and Brazilian market specifically. Just to come back to initially to your question, as you might know, I know, of course, I'm very proud to be German, but on the other hand, compared to Brazil, arbitration in Germany is not so relevant as it is in Brazil. Maybe that's also one of the reasons why I came late to arbitration. And especially Germany is not an important seat in international arbitration. There are many German users, but they normally don't seat arbitration in international arbitration much in Germany. And also Germany is not one of the most selected substantive laws in international arbitration. So that is also why I basically got in touch with arbitration when I moved to Switzerland, which is a completely different story. In Brazil, as in Switzerland, we have a long-standing tradition of international arbitration. Probably Geneva is certainly next to Paris and London, New York, one of the four most classical seats of international arbitration. So my involvement with arbitration, international arbitration, got much stronger when I moved to Switzerland. So, and having said this, why Brazil and why market entry via Brazil? And there it comes, it pops up that I have a formation as an economist. Each market, if you want to enter into a market, you should not choose a consolidated market. Entering a consolidated market is almost impossible. Entering the Swiss arbitration market is almost impossible because it's strong, but it's not growing. It's not growing since a decade. They are rather struggling to keep up with Asian markets and London. So Brazil is still a growing market. Growth slowed down a little bit. I think we are going now to catch up again. But compared to consolidated markets, Brazil had huge opportunities. And if you want to penetrate a market, you must choose a market that is growing and not a consolidated market. So that's why I personally think that market entry in international arbitration via an Asian country, via Brazil or another Latin American country eventually, Uruguay maybe nowadays, is easier and is probably has more chances to succeed than trying it in Geneva, where you have a market that is consolidated since 100 years.
Thank you, Peter. That's very interesting. And I'd like to hear Paula about this before and then Domingos before we close. Paula, please.
Thank you, Cesar. I'll be very brief. My opinion is similar to Peter's opinion. It's just to say that Ciarb gave me the opportunity to be in contact with a strong international group, and a strong international group of strong international arbitrators and strong international academics. We are, I would say, in constant contact with each other, and we come from very different legal cultures. So this is my experience with Ciarb. I would never assess such a group if I wasn't a member of the Ciarb. This is my view of my experience until this point with this with Ciarb, with this association. It's really strong, international, people coming from very different cultures, where you can learn, you can exchange opinions. It's very positive, Cesar. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. And Domingos, what's your take on this matter?
Yes, well, Cesar, I indeed had a very broad international experience being a lawyer. And I was lucky to have been partner of one of the major Brazilian, but not only Brazilian, Latin American law firms, which enabled me to travel lots of countries and to exercise to some extent my skills in some of their courts. But being an international, if I can say, arbitrator, it's a totally different thing. I mean, we are totally different animals, if you wish. And I think that coming from a country like Brazil and having had experiences mainly as a lawyer, although we may say a little bit an international lawyer, I think that it's fundamental to have the international exposition that Ciarb provides to us. I think there is no other way to try to be in contact with all new developments, thoughts, studies, very clever and highly reputed arbitrators and professors, if you not are amongst them. And this is exactly what Ciarb provides us to us in an environment which is, I must say, very nice. And although being a big responsibility, I think that you enable us to take it lightly and to enjoy it, which I think it's the most important thing, for at least for me at this point of my career, being able to continue to learn, to have this international exposure, to be in contact with people highly intelligent and knowledgeable, and still have fun being in contact with you. So it's, again, I mean, it's really a pleasure, and it's something that I would invite everybody to do, to try to do, because it's very rewarding, as I said.
Thank you, Domingos. And well, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I think we all leave here with this with this idea of lifelong learning, and as Domingo said, trying to have fun while you do it, right? So before we close, I'd like to highlight that the registrations for the accelerated route to fellowship that will take place in Brazil in October are about to close. And so if you're interested, please hurry to register. And I'd like to invite you for the next CIR Brazil moment episode that will take place on the 28th of September at the same time, 6:30 p.m. Brasilia time. And in that episode, Tonico Monteiro da Silva, a fellow from CIR Brazil branch, will interview fellows Cristina Santini and Andrea Palma and member Alexandre Ferrari, who are all judges, about how important becoming a CIR member can be for a sitting or retired judge. So that will be the topic of our next episode. Thank you again. I'd like to thank again all our interviewees, Paula Costa Silva, Peter Sester, Domingos Refinetti, and see you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
all.
Cesar.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. See you all.